Select it. Alright, Shalom, all praise to Yahweh Shemel Shah, that belongs to the Apostle GMS. This I'm Allah coming at you on the video. Now the last video, I was going to come not into their secret. I kind of cut the video off a little bit early because I wanted to go back and show you and go into a little bit more syncretism, or rather just rehash real quick. Anybody that's familiar with my videos, you know that I do that a lot. I was just gonna show you just going back into the synchronizing of the spirits of voodoo and its a syncretic relationship with the Roman Catholic saints. But that was alright because I already did that in the video earlier in that video, so that's why the video I pressed stop as opposed to pressing pause, going back to the other page and then pressing record again. But it's fine. So now I want to go a little bit into the Santeria aspect, because we know that Simeon and Levi is talking about the Dominicans and the Haitians. So we got the voodoo part, but now we got to get into the Santeria part, which is heavily associated with, not just the Dominican Republic, but Cuba as well as Puerto Rico. So let's get into that. It says, this is from a website called science.jrank.org. Syncretism, Santeria, and Voodoo. I already went into syncretism on the last show. If you don't know what that means, just go on Google and type in syncretism or religious syncretism. It says, yet another important example of syncretism can be found in the Caribbean. As a result of the slave trade, a host of West African religious beliefs were transplanted to Cuba, Haiti, and other Caribbean islands, as well as to Brazil. Because there's various other types of, these kind of religions. And different places in the Caribbean and Central South America have their own names for their own little different ways of doing it. But the primary two are Santeria and Voodoo, which is associated with the Dominican Republic and Haiti. That's why we're focusing on these two. It says, and other Caribbean islands, as well as to Brazil in the 17th and 18th centuries. There they intermingled with the Roman Catholicism of the slave masters and plantation owners. The result was a set of syncretic religions, the most important of which are Santeria and Voodoo. See? So now that's how we know that primarily it's going into Santeria and Voodoo. It says, goes back to the Dominican Republic and Haiti, Simeon and Levi. Santeria took shape primarily in Cuba and reflects for the most part the beliefs of the Yoruba people, who live in what is now Nigeria. So Santeria took shape primarily in Cuba. I had to pause the video real quick. Santeria took shape primarily in Cuba and reflects for the most part the beliefs of the Yoruba people, who live in what is now Nigeria. And remember, we went to Voodoo and mentioned like the homemade people. I'll probably go into that a little bit deeper in the following episodes, but when I go later on to the verse, I'm gonna get deeper into it. The focus of the Yoruba people and other West African belief systems is upon a pantheon of deities called Orishas. So the Voodoos call them laws, and now they call them Orishas. However, in Santeria, these figures are often identified, that is, synchronized with Catholic saints. A good example is Shango, a male god of thunder, lightning, and fire, who was nevertheless identified with Saint Barbara, a devout young woman who lived in the 4th century CE, and who was beheaded by her father for refusing to give up her Christian faith and marry according to his wishes. At the moment of her beheading, her father was struck by lightning, and this gave rise to the legend that Saint Barbara had power over lightning bolts. So it says Saint Barbara had power over lightning bolts, just as Shango was said to be the god of thunder, lightning, and fire. So that's the similarities. Although Shango was a masculine Orisha, the similarities between this legend and the Yoruba traditions about him led to the syncretism in question. So the similarities led to the syncretism. Okay? And this goes back into Genesis 49:6. O my soul, come not thou into their secret. That's the part that we're still focusing on, but we're just going into the Santeria aspect of it, so that way you can break this down to people. Because normally we always go into the voodoo part. You always hear brothers say voodoo, Santeria, but they may not really go that in depth with it. And voodoo will be the primary one often spoken on. I just want to go into the Santeria part too to give brothers an understanding on that. Now here's what it's called, aboutsanteria.com. Santeria and religious syncretism. It says, when African slaves were brought to Cuba in colonial, so it says this is the altar. Matter of fact, let me see what this word means. Translate. Society the Christ. Okay. Let's go back. Altar in Palmiro, Cuba. When African slaves were brought to Cuba in colonial times, they weren't allowed to openly practice their African religions. Generally, they were forced to convert to Catholicism and show at least outward appearances of practicing the faith of their Spanish masters. Behind the veneer of Catholicism, however, Afro-Cubans kept their old religions alive by synchronizing their deities with Christian saints. They knew that the Virgin of Charity was not really Obatala, but they saw some similarities between the two that allowed them to secretly worship Obatala while appearing to worship the Virgin. Even so, they look at the similarity between the two, and with those similarities, they say we're going to synchronize. With religious syncretism, when you're taking two different schools of thought and you synchronizing or you're combining the beliefs of each into one. Even today, you might find statues of Catholic saints on the altar of a practicing Santero, but there'll be another altar somewhere in the house where the African symbols of the orishas are kept. The two are never really confused in the minds of practitioners. The orishas are complex, mystical beings, and their essence can't be expressed in a single image or form. They exist in the form of divine energy that is all around us and lives within us. So this is what they believe. So regardless if they're using the image of the actual so-called orisha, regardless of using the image of the orisha or the saint, they still feel that the orishas are complex mystical beings, and their essence or their being can't be expressed in a single image or form. So they believe that they can connect with these deities regardless if they actually have the image of the orisha itself or the image of the saint that it's associated with. It can't be just represented in a single image or form. So in either form or either idol, they believe that the essence of that orisha is still there. They exist in the form of divine energy that is all around us and lives within us. There are many patakis, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, sacred stories about the orishas that explain their origin, their life on earth, and their relationship with God and each other. Each orisha has a distinct personality. Resistance and change in Cuban Santeria. Now we're talking about Cuban Santeria because this is who it's heavily associated with, but we're still talking about because this is who this particular site is associated with, but it's still Santeria, so it still has the same, background, the same practice. Slavery as an institution, and we're going to go into more Dominican Republic with Santeria too. But even if I don't, this is still just telling you the origins of it. It's telling you what's associated with Cuba, but it's still Santeria itself. Slavery as an institution in Santeria itself is still a syncretic religion, which still goes into the idea of come not into their secret. So whether we're talking about Santeria in Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, it's still a syncretic religion. Slavery as an institution, says more slaves were needed for sugar plantations. See that? It says slavery as an institution arrived in Cuba with the Spanish settlers at the end of the 15th century. But it wasn't until the 19th century that very large numbers of Africans from Yorubaland, today's southwestern Nigeria, came to work the sugar plantations in central Cuba between 1820 and 1860. For example, approximately 275,000 Yoruba-speaking people came to Cuba. They were known as Lukumi. Other ethnic groups from Africa, such as Congo, Bantu, people from what is today Angola, outnumbered the Lukumi in colonial Cuba, but the Lukumi brought with them a very strongly developed culture that they refused to surrender to the dominant Spanish one. So now you see, they was conquered by the Spanish, and you had the Haitians who were conquered by who? The French. Santeria, as we know, and that same people that the Dominicans conquered by the Spanish. Santeria, as we know it today, grew out of this spirit of resistance. At the same time, the religion remained alive and flourished because it showed an ability to adapt to new circumstances. Using metaphors borrowed from nature, the Lukumi understood that in the face of a violent storm, the most flexible trees and plants would survive, whereas the ones that refused to bend would be ripped up at the roots and die. Okay, let me see. Real quick. Okay, here is lovetoknow.com. What is Santeria? A guide to its practices and beliefs. This is what I was looking for. Santeria is a prominent religion with African roots. It was brought to Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic by African slaves and is a blend of Roman Catholicism and the Yoruban religious beliefs. Santeria spiritual practices. Santeria means way of the saints and is a unique oral tradition-based religion. Even though the slaves were forced to be baptized and convert to Catholicism, we went into that in Code Noir. Let's go back. This is Code Noir. And when you go to Article 2, all slaves that shall be in our island shall be baptized and instructed in the Roman and Apostolic faith. So we're seeing that right here. There you go. Article 3, it says what? We forbid any religion other than Roman and Catholic and Apostolic faith from being practiced in public. There you go. So let's go back. There's other parts I can go to, but I'm not going to go any more into that. Into Code Noir, maybe another lesson later on. Lord will, I'm going to go more into that. It says, even though the slaves were forced to be baptized in Santeria means way of the saints and is a unique oral tradition-based religion. Even though the slaves were forced to be baptized and convert to Catholicism, they retained their Yoruba tradition heritage through their religious practices. The slaves meshed their religion with Catholicism, much the same way slaves in Haiti did with voodoo. The transformation of the original religion can be seen in how the Yoruba deities, Orishas, were blended with the Catholic saints. The Santeria belief system is based on the theory that all life comes from a primal life force known as the Ake or growth. That's the point we need. We needed there to go into come into that secret part. But like I said before, we're gonna go more into it. So look, even right here, religions. I'm not gonna go more into it. I'm gonna say that for the next lesson. And this here is the corresponding. These are the Orishas on the left, and these are the saints that they correspond with, the Roman Catholic saints, and in the middle. And on the right is the principles in which they're said to represent. See right here, Shango, right there. This one is spelled with an S. Last time it was spelled with a C. Shango. And you see who corresponds to Shango? Remember Saint Barbara? Barbara represents what? Force or thunder. See? Right here. List the similarities between voodoo religion and Catholic religion. And it just goes into Catholic followers believe in the Almighty God who was the originator of the lies. Voodoo believes in the creator God, Bandai, which means good God. And I believe in French, who is the originator of their lives. And you could just look here and you could see the similarities. Catholic have various saints with specific roles and duties where followers worship them through adoration and reverence of sacred objects. The voodoo religion has various loa who are also referred to as mysteries, who are intermediaries between God, Bandai, and human. This is going back to the voodoo one we did last episode. I just want to hit on this too. Catholic followers believe that the Eucharist is transformed in the actual body and blood of Christ during Mass. That's called, I believe, that goes back to, I believe, Aristotle's belief in something called transubstantiationism. I didn't go into that one in probably like 7 to 8 years, so Lord will, I'll probably get back into that. Voodoo followers believe that spirits are transformed into living beings after occupying a person. And in the red it says, the high voodoo practice from the European slave masters and enslaved African people in Haiti synchronized the law with the Roman Catholic saints by frequently having images of Catholic figures displayed. I mean, come on. Same thing it did with Santeria. See, I just went on YouTube and typed in Shango Santa Barbara. Look right here. There's supposed to be Shango on the left, and there's supposed to be Santa Barbara on the right. And you see both of them have the lightning bolt behind them, right? Right on the axe that Shango is supposed to be holding in his right hand. There's a lightning bolt hitting it. And on the right, you see a lightning bolt that's right on that castle, shaped like the rook piece on the chessboard. So, you know, there you go. I could get a little bit more into this, but the video has been about 15 minutes. Hopefully your brothers got the gist of that. And Lord will, even though I read a portion of that verse in Genesis 49, that's all I really needed to get. That's the main focal point he was getting to. Just continuing on with this lesson. It said Genesis 49:6, O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly mine honor, be not thou united, for in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they dig down a wall. Could have sworn it said Hugh down the wall before. But that's the King James version. This is the King James version. So with that, you know, and we know this is talking about Simeon and Levi. Because Genesis 49:5 says Simeon and Levi are brethren, instruments of cruelty on their habitations. So Lord will, we're going to continue with this lesson. So with that, to end it off, I'm going to say Shalom. We'll praise Yahweh B'Shem Shah. Holy brother, learn something. Shalom.